Well, it's a mailbag episode, and you've got some questions, and I will try to answer them on this episode of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yeah, let's do this. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for over a decade, and this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. So, this was supposed to be a Friday episode. Let me explain what happened. I actually began recording at Acrisure Arena, and I was having a plethora of audio issues. So it did not sound good. So just scrap that first segment and gonna just re-record it now. So that's what's going on. Now, some of these questions might be a little bit dated, or I've already answered them on a previous podcast, but I'm going to try to get through as many of them as possible. And I'm going to start off with some of the questions from Luis Alberto Johansson. A couple of these I answered already. So, first question off the bat. Do you think that Cutter Gauthier would be one of the points leaders on the Ducks? Honestly, yes. I already answered that he should be a Calder candidate. He should be a Calder finalist this season. I have Macklin Celebrini, Cutter Gauthier as two of the top three rookies potentially this season in the National Hockey League. And I have him as one of the points leaders, but not as many points as a Troy Terry or a Trevor Zegras, who I have 1 and 2 respectively as of right now. So those are my two top points getters. But Cutter, I could see cracking the top 5 in points for the Ducks this season. He is still young. He's going to be growing into his role more and more as the weeks and days go on. So that's my prediction for that. His next question, how many points do you think the Ducks will get, and do you see the Ducks making the playoffs this year? I answered that also on the previous on the prediction podcast. So in case you missed it, I predicted the Ducks would get 77 points this season. That would not be good enough for the playoffs. In order to make the playoffs, they would have to have a 30-point jump at least. I don't see that big of a jump happening. I think a plus 30 is honestly too much to ask for. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I'm not saying that there's no hope, but I'm already giving an 18 to 20 point improvement from last season to this season. Last year, they barely got 59 points. They didn't even crack 60 points. And it's very rare for a team to jump 30 plus points in one season. It just doesn't happen too often. So I think 77 is fair, but I just don't see the playoffs. But then he asks, do you see them making the playoffs the season after? So we're talking 25-26. If the Ducks remain healthy, and if they can pick up someone in free agency next season, like someone pretty solid next season, they've got a chance. But it really falls on how the Ducks progress this year. Can they improve 18 to 20 points? Can they show that there is something more in the tank? Can they show that whatever new systems they're doing is going to be sustainable? As I've mentioned before, Greg Cronin has his own coaching staff finally. So now he can really let things flow. And this is Cronin's team now. This is the first year that it really is Greg Cronin's team. And I feel like it's even like maybe the second year that this is truly a team that GM Pat Verbeek really began to put together. But we're still not there yet. Not this year. Next season, I could see them having another 10-point improvement. If things go smoothly this season, then they could make the playoffs in 25-26. So that's going to be my prediction for that one. All right. This is kind of an interesting question. I like this one. This is an email question. So, do I want to answer that one now? Yeah, I'm going to answer it right now. Hi, Jason. Do you possibly assuming the Ducks do not make the playoffs, which players do you think is going to be the first one to get traded? And do you possibly see anyone in the free agent market? So I think it's a little early to look at free agency for 2025 because some of those guys could get traded at the deadline. So I think it's a little bit not unfair, but it's a little bit weird to kind of make those kind of predictions right now as to who's going to be available and who's going to get traded. If I were to be a betting man, this is tough. I'm going to say, as far as Ducks are concerned, maybe Frank Vatrano is going to be the easy answer here, the easy cop-out answer, because Vatrano only has 1 year left on his contract. He's making a team-friendly $3.65 million this season. Teams are going to be salivating for the services of Frank Vatrano. So, unfortunately, if things go south for the Ducks this season, and if they are way out of it by the trade deadline, then Frank Vatrano is going to be the first one to get moved, and teams are going to be going after him. But the Ducks could get a high draft pick. They only have the 1 first-round draft pick. They have 0 second-round draft picks this year. So maybe they could look at a draft pick for this coming trade deadline, again, if things go south. And someone else that I think could get some looks would be probably Robbie Fabry. $4 million, but because Robbie Fabry is a little bit younger, only 28 years old. Last season, Robbie Fabry averaged about half a point a game, so not too bad. I mean, for a forward, it's not bad. A little bit of a downturn from the previous couple of years, but still solid enough. So Fabry, I think, is going to be another player that I think is going to get some looks. Brock McGinn, probably not. Isaac Lundstrom's an RFA, so definitely not. Same with Brett Leeson and Mason McTavish. As far as defensemen, Earl Vakanainen's an RFA. Brian Dumoulin is an unrestricted free agent, so he might get some looks as well. Would any players possibly be getting traded if there's 2 years left on their contract? Honestly, probably not. The only players that would qualify for that would be Ross Johnston, Russ, that's it, just Johnston, because Gautier's an RFA, Carlson's an RFA, and Zegras is an RFA. So I don't think any of those guys get traded. So I'm going to go in order: Vatrano, Fabry, and Dumoulin as your possible trade bait targets for other teams this coming trade deadline. But I'm going to say it one more time: if things go south. We're going to head into the first admission. I've got a few more questions. I'm actually looking down on my phone right now because I have some more questions that I do want to answer. So we will get to those on the other side. And now a brief word from Hims. Now, you ever feel like you need a little bit of boost in the bedroom? Well, Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, and they're generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor visits. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan from Hims. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason Hernandez, and I've got some more questions for y'all. So we're just going to get to those right now. These come from Tom, who always likes to send in a lot of questions. So thanks for these questions. First one: compare and contrast Red Wing Mo Sider and Stian Solberg. All right, let's do that. Mo Seider is more of an offensive-minded defenseman than Stian Solberg is. Solberg does have a good offensive game. Solberg is a good skater. I think Mo Seider has a little bit more creativity and a little bit more awareness on the defensive end, but that's also from being older. And I think the one thing that I do like about Mo Seider's game is his skating ability, and he kind of just flows with the game. He's one of those players that is always noticeable on the ice, and I mean that in a good way. If you are always noticed on the ice, if you are making the key plays, if you are making the key assists, then yes, you are noticeable. Stian Solberg is more of a bruiser, more of a heavy hitter. He was described by one colleague as the most violent player in this year's NHL draft. So he's got a bit of bite to his game. He is good defensively. He is a shut-down defenseman. And I think that's the main difference between Mo Seider and Stian Solberg is Seider is more creativity, a little bit more offensive-minded. Stian Solberg can get his shot off when he has a chance, but he is definitely more on the mindset of, I'm going to crush guys and I'm going to make them pay for it. Not that that's a bad thing at all, especially when you have someone like Radko Gudas on your roster. I mean, this roster in general is more of a bruising type of roster in general. So I think that's probably one of the biggest differences between Mo Seider and Stian Solberg. All right, next question. This one is a tough one to answer, given what just happened. Is Sasha Pastujov a bust? I'm not going to give him the bust label at all. Yes, it is a little bit distressing is the word I'm going to use here. It's distressing that he did get sent down to the ECHL. And I'm not going to say concerning, but it is a little bit telling that Pastujov did not have a solid camp. I mean, he was fine during camp, but he wasn't one of those players that was super noticeable all the time, especially during preseason play. Rookie camp or rookie faceoff was fine, but once he got to preseason action, there were times where he looked lost out there. That being said, is he a bust? No, I'm not going to label him a bust just yet. He could still work his way back up to the AHL, and if he does well in the AHL, you never know. What do I think his ceiling is? I think his ceiling is tweener. Ceiling is NHL, AHL tweener. In other words, someone that can get a few games, can get a cup of coffee in the National Hockey League, but still have a plethora of games in the American Hockey League. So I think that's not a bad ceiling for that kind of draft pick. So that's what I'm going to go with. Next question. Who do I think is going to be the backup netminder? Well, that question was answered recently. Reimer is solid enough, so I think that's going to be the backup, but I think Dostal is going to wind up playing the majority of games. Unless there's a back-to-back, especially the second game of back-to-back, then it's likely going to be James Reimer. Otherwise, it's going to be the Lukáš Dostal show. John Gibson's still going to be out for another at least week, so we're looking at probably 4, 5, 6 games where we're going to have Lukáš Dostal make some starts. Next question. I personally think Warren, as much as I like him, is a turnover machine. Personal thoughts. I will both agree and disagree with that. Warren does have a tendency to, I think it's worse that he has a tendency to turn the puck over, ... on the blue line. Those are the places where you do not want to make turnovers. And I think it's more a measure of where those turnovers are happening as opposed to the amounts of turnovers happening. What's worse, turning the puck over, right before a shot, or is it worse turning the puck over in the neutral zone and thus a breakaway happens on the other end? Personally, I think it's much worse to have a turnover in the neutral zone or in your own zone, and that could result in a high danger or high quality shot for the opposing team. So I think those are worse. And I think that's one thing that Noah Warren does need to work on, maybe kind of a lot, because he didn't have a whole lot of penalties, but it's where they were taking place and what was happening after the turnover. There was even one play during the preseason where Noah Warren just got burned off of, I think it was his own turnover, and tried to get back in time to prevent a goal, and just didn't happen. He got absolutely torched on that play. So I'm not going to say that's too much of a concern. That is something that can be taught. That's something that players work on all the time. So that's my personal thoughts on that. Well, it is about that time to head into the second intermission. I've got a couple more questions. I'm going to try to answer those as best as possible, and then I will go into the... Actually, I'm going to go into the YouTube after this brief intermission and try to answer any questions that are over there. So we will get to those on the other side. And now a brief word from FanDuel. That one works. So FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and you get a hunch in the middle of a game. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And with the NHL season just beginning and the NBA starting very soon, you can get all of the action on FanDuel. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please, folks, please gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, or TLOPN, or TLOPN. So what I'm going to do here is I tend to do this blind, where I just go straight to the comments and see if there's any questions on there that can be answered. So I'm going to try to answer those. And I do have a lot of comments that I'm still trying to catch up on. Yes, I'm trying to turn my mic up. Hopefully it sounds a little bit better. This is an interesting comment that I got from Brian Van Wyk, 9425. Ducks are going to be better than most are predicting, but the young defense needs another season to develop. And I can't take a team seriously that is giving Ryan Strome a regular shift. Thoughts? Okay, so I have some thoughts on that one. Ryan Strome is getting overpaid, maybe, but I'm okay giving him regular shifts because he was once one of those guys that was the most noticeable player on the ice for a good 2 to 3 years. So we're kind of basing that on past performances of Ryan Strome. That's what we're basing that on. As far as the defense, yeah, they do need another season to develop, especially all the young guys. Jackson Lacombe. There is a noticeable development between this season and last season. This season, Lacombe was seen getting a lot more playing time, a lot more power play time. So the coaching staff obviously has some comfort and confidence in the young Lacombe. Minchikov, still only 20 years old, still has some rough edges to polish, but given another year, I think Minty's going to be really good. Tristan Luneau, the same. Olin Zellweger, absolutely the same. And those are 4 young guys right there that are still developing. That is your future defensive core. So I actually, maybe not even a year, but I say another couple of seasons to fully develop. It is going to take time, and I say this all the time. This is going to take patience, Ducks fans. Patience is probably the #1 word that I say the most on this podcast over the last 3 or 4 seasons. So I'm going to stick with that answer. I give it another 2 years. Sorry. All right. This one from Richard Heacock. 2024-25 should be a strong step forward. We have an impressive young core. Yeah, we do. Penalty and power play disparities need significant improvement. I'm going to stop right there. Okay. Penalty killing. That is still going to be a bit of an issue, especially with the young defensemen that are still learning little by little how to have an effective penalty kill. That is going to come with the growing pains. That is going to come with experience. That is going to come with learning what happens during different scenarios on the opposing team's power play. So while they do need significant improvement, I don't think there's a whole lot that they can do about that because it is going to be still a learning experience on that penalty kill. Now on the power play, The Ducks looked really good in the preseason on the power play, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the Ducks were going to be a good power play team. I did make that very bold prediction that the Ducks were going to have a top 10 power play this season. Do I want to stick with that? Yeah, why not? Top 10 power play is attainable for the Ducks. I think that is going to improve as the season goes on, but penalty kill is still going to be a slight bit of a problem for the Duckies. So that's just my honest 2 cents on that one. Apparently, a lot of fans are not huge fans of the new song choices. Yes, I know the songs have changed, and I get it. I totally get it. I'm going to miss hearing Sweetness by Jimmy Eat World after a Ducks home win, because that's the song. That's been the song for years and years and years. Maybe they feel it is time for a change. You got a new look, new coaching staff, new jerseys, new logo. So I guess the feeling is if everything else is going to be fresh and new, you may as well make the songs fresh and new. So from a marketing standpoint, I get it. That doesn't mean we have to like it, but we get it. All right, let's see. Should I look at any more? Yeah, I guess I could look at a couple of more here. Nothing there. One more I'm going to look at here. Ooh, there's some questions. Actually, I'm just going to answer 2 of them. From D-Rock, do you think the Ducks will be competitive this year? Yeah, they'll be competitive to a point. This one from Hawkman007. Regarding John Gibson, is this bad luck? Was Gibson even the starter? He's out many weeks, which means he's out at least the first few games of the regular season, or at most the first 12 games. The Ducks have no back-to-back games in that stretch, so start Dostal in every game until Gibby returns. So that's actually a mistake. There was the back-to-back this weekend, so that's why the Ducks picked up Reimer off of waivers. So is it bad luck? Injuries are always bad luck. Look what happened with the Ducks last season. They had a ton of injuries, a slew of bad injuries, and look what happened. I still contend if it wasn't for those injuries, the Ducks would have at least been competitive all the way up to the month of March and maybe even the first week of April. Injuries are a part of the game, but not to the extent that the Ducks had. They were one of the most injured teams last season. That one is a little bit of luck. So the second part, was Gibson even the starter? Yes, he was still going to be the opening day starter, and the rumor was that it was going to be an even split, so it was going to be around 40-40 for both Dostal and Gibby. Now that Gibby's out, and this gives Dostal a chance to really take over, I'm still going to stick with Dostal getting 45-plus starts. He's well on his way. I don't think he's going to come back this week. I think it's going to be at least another couple of weeks before John Gibson gets back. We'll see if he makes the East Coast trip. That's coming up in about a week. All right. Those are the questions. Once again, thank you all for your comments. Thanks for your questions. We'll open up the mailbag again in maybe 2 to 3 weeks. The email, as always, is lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. And you can follow me on Twitter X @StimpyJD. The show's Twitter X is @LO_Ducks. The email address, once again, lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. And go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down below. This podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc., etc. And once again, with everything going on just on my end, for those of you that have reached out, I sincerely want to thank you all for your continued and unwavering support. Without going into detail, I just want to say I appreciate you all, and I appreciate the kind words. So just thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason Hernandez saying have a great rest of the day. Please remember to be safe out there. Please be kind to one another. And Ducks fly together.